They were arguing about my mother's money while her heart monitor clicked. I stood at the foot of the bed, hands inside the sleeves of my coat, watching the green line rise and fall across a machine that never blinked. The room smelled like antiseptic and peppermint lotion. Outside the window, late snow hovered over the parking lot like dust over a forgotten book. My name is Laurel Finch, 40, paralegal by habit, caregiver by necessity. For the past year, my mother's small apartment had been the center of my days. Then the hospital room became my address. Her savings are joint with me, my brother, Dean, said, trying to keep his voice low. It wasn't low enough. Mom said it made sense. Transfers are cleaner that way. My Aunt Karen adjusted the scarf around her neck, eyes sharp and wet. Your mother promised help with my mortgage. She told me last Easter, before the strokes.
She did.
Across the bed, my cousin Lila tapped out messages on her phone, then tucked it away with a sigh that sounded rehearsed. This is exactly why people write wills. Or, at least texts. I pressed a damp washcloth along my mother's forearm, pretending I couldn't hear them. The nurse had stepped out to answer call light. It was just us, family gathered at the edge of a cliff, looking down into a fog of numbers. My mother's breath came softly, and the machine answered for her. I had been the one who grocery shopped, changed sheets, argued with pharmacists, and learned every shortcut through our town. Dean had visited twice in 6 months, once with takeout, once with a new suit. She told me the CDs mature in March, he added. Someone has to make sure it doesn't get eaten by fees. I stared at my mother's hands. The knuckles were bigger now, puffed like rising bread. When I was a girl, those hands taught me to fold hospital corners on sheets, to carry a bowl with 2 hands, to walk home without opinions that weren't useful. Do something kind before you do something loud, she would say, tying her apron behind her back. It was a practical creed, stitched into everything she touched. I've kept receipts for the costs, I said, finally. Home aids, med adjustments, the elevator repair. Mom signed a durable power of attorney after the first stroke. It's on file with her bank and the clinic. Dean rolled his eyes. No one's disputing that you paid for things. We just need clarity. Otherwise, people get hurt. He meant himself. He always meant himself. My aunt smoothed the bed rail with 2 fingers, like she was petting a cat. We all want what she wanted. I looked at my mother's face, pale and tired under the soft light. She had once been a grocery cashier who remembered people's favorite apples, then a library volunteer who shelved biographies in perfect straight lines. She always knew whose turn it was, who had been waiting longest, whose need was most urgent. She gave generously, like it was a rule. A volunteer from the hospital foundation had stopped by earlier with a brochure about legacy gifts, a kind older man with a cardigan, and the calm voice of someone who had seen every kind of courage. He had set it on the windowsill when I said I didn't have space in my head. I could still see the edge of that brochure now, a corner of blue beyond the curtain. Clarity, I repeated. The word felt like a key pressed into my palm. The monitor pinged a little faster, then settled. Lila checked the time and tugged her coat closed. We should step out. The social worker is coming back with forms. Maybe we can outline next steps. Dean nodded, as if he had planned it. Let's at least agree on the accounts. I tucked the washcloth into the basin and touched the back of my mother's hand. The skin was warm, the pulse steady. I remembered her last coherent words to me, said the night before, when I was feeding her spoonfuls of broth. Don't let them turn me into a ledger, she whispered, breath thin but stubborn. The spark of tension came like a match being struck, tiny and bright. I reached for the windowsill, slid the blue brochure toward me, and slipped it into my coat pocket. If a ledger was what they wanted, a different kind of accounting would follow. The next morning began with a nurse changing the 4 and the sky turning silver. I had slept in the chair, shoes off, coat over my knees. Hospitals teach a person about angles, about drifting without really falling. When I splashed water on my face and caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror, I saw my mother's guarded patience looking back. There was also a small, hard point in my chest, like a bead of iron. The night had cooled it. Now it warmed to touch. My family arrived in shifts, carrying coffee and intentions. Dean came first, tie already straight. He set his briefcase under the chair, glanced at the monitor, then at me. "We'll need Mom's passwords," he said. "Banks get jumpy when there's a death. We should be ahead of it." "She isn't gone," I said. My voice was even. "And the bank already knows who I am." "That's not the point." Karen swept in next, lipstick set, sorrow arranged. She kissed my mother's forehead and sighed. "Your mother worked hard her whole life. She deserves her wishes honored." "She does," I said and meant it. Lila arrived with a bouquet that looked rented. She placed it at the foot of the bed, took a picture, and said she hated the word estate because it sounded like a yard. The hospital social worker, a woman named Marta, drew the curtain and asked if we needed anything. Her badge had a tiny enamel daisy near the clip. "We have a chaplain on call," she said gently, "and the foundation team if you want to talk about honoring your mom's legacy. No pressure, just options." Dean smiled like a man helping the weak. "We'll handle our family matters first." Marta nodded and left, and the air felt thinner. The morning stretched into early afternoon. Doctors passed like careful shadows. My mother slept in the place beyond sleep, shoulders sinking slightly, breaths measured by a machine. I texted my boss that I was out the rest of the week, that I would return the following Monday. He sent a heart, then a thumbs up, an odd sequence that made me grateful for his clumsy kindness. At noon, the hospital cafeteria provided sandwiches that tasted like paper but filled a need. Dean brought two back and set one beside me. "Let's map this," he said. "Accounts, house, car, jewelry. We cannot argue over every fork." I opened the sandwich and closed it again. "Mom gave the car to Rosa, her homemade," I said. She wrote out a note after the first stroke. We copied it and had the clinic witness. "The tableware is mine. She told me to keep the blue set from her wedding because I'm the one who uses them." Karen frowned, calculating. "The house is the main thing." "The house is small," I said, "and old. But the neighborhood is changing," Lila added, eyes bright. "People are buying to tear down and build. It's an opportunity." My mother coughed, a dry sound that rattled. I raised the bed a little and held water to her lips. For a second, her eyes opened and met mine, clear as Sunday. She didn't speak, but her hand found my wrist and stayed there, warm and light. Then the moment passed, and she drifted back. Dean cleared his throat. "We need numbers, Laurel. We need to act like adults." I thought of all the quiet adult tasks people never see. The late-night laundry. The insurance forms with their endless boxes. The winter mornings with a walker and a scarf and a bus schedule. I thought of my mother's whispered request, not to be turned into a ledger. The iron bead in my chest grew heavier, like it was telling me the shape of itself. When the foundation volunteer returned, he brought a new brochure and a form with calm blue lines. He was joined by a development officer, a woman with gray hair cut into a neat swing. Her name was Caroline. She wore a simple pin shaped like a book. "Many families find comfort in creating something in their loved one's name," she said softly. "A fund for the library cart, the music program, the emergency medicine pool. No pressure, only possibility." Dean exhaled. "We're focusing on practicalities." Caroline nodded. "A gift can be practical. It can help families who cannot pay for a second night or cover a piece of equipment that shortens someone's suffering." I held the blue form, felt its classroom calm. Caroline's eyes were kind without being sticky. "Come by the office if you like," she said. "We're just down the hall. You don't have to make decisions today." After they left, I slipped the form under my notebook. The conversation around me resumed in careful, hungry circles. I watched the window. Snow feathered down and melted on the sill, each flake a blink. I thought about what inheritance was meant to be, in my mother's language. Not a cash box, not a trophy, a practice. A way of moving through hard rooms with your hands steady. When the afternoon settled and footsteps faded, I made a small, interior vow. I would not let my mother's life be itemized by voices that never showed up to trim her pills. I would sign the paper that told a different story, and I would not raise my voice while doing it. The proof began with a folder my mother labeled in pencil, neat and faint. I found it tucked inside her tote bag, the one she used for the library, the one that had a small tea stain on the side. The folder held copies of a living trust, executed 9 months earlier, before the second stroke, at a time when she could still walk slowly to the corner and back. I remembered the day she asked me to drive her to the notary. She had said, "I don't want to be a task list when I go, Lori. I want to be a promise that someone else can keep." Inside the folder, a single-page amendment sat clipped to the front. It was simple in my mother's style. The trust became irrevocable at her death. She had appointed me successor trustee, with instructions to satisfy modest bequests to family, then establish a named charitable fund at the hospital where she was born. The Margaret Finch Compassion Fund, it read, supporting patient comfort programs, music at bedside, and emergency family grants at the discretion of the social work department. My mother had initialed each paragraph, letters small but steady. Behind the trust, there were bank designations, payable on death to the trust, and a letter from Caroline on hospital letterhead, confirming that years ago my mother had asked for model language, then disappeared for months to think. There was also a note in my mother's handwriting, blue pen, tiny script. "Laurel, if I forget to say this later, please choose the music program first. Remember Mrs. Ortega with the violin. Remember how the room changed." I sat back in the visitor chair and let the folders rest in my lap. The machine beeped, the 4-line hissed, and the snow outside turned to rain. Somewhere down the hall, a television laughed at no one. I felt both immense relief and a new responsibility that sat like a warm stone on my sternum. My mother had already named the shape of the gift. I did not need to invent a plan or defend a wish. I needed to carry out a promise. There was another letter, too, from a lawyer I knew by reputation. Not a flashy man. His name was Evan Rios. He had offices over the hardware store and rode his bike to work in every season. The letter reminded my mother to keep her accounts aligned and to store her healthcare directive in a place that could be easily found. It invited her successor trustee to call with questions. It included a line in Evan's careful type. "A charitable fund can hold both the memory and the manner of a person." I texted his office, expecting a reply the next day. He wrote back within minutes, confirming he was in court, but free at 4. "I can swing by the hospital," he added. "No charge." I felt an immediate gratitude that surprised me. In law work, time was money, and generosity could feel like fiction. He treated it like weather. You planned around it, you appreciated the clear days. At 3:55, Evan appeared at the doorway, hair damp from the drizzle, bike helmet under his arm. He greeted Dean and Karen with a soft hello, then stood near the chart as if he had always belonged to this room. "You must be Laurel," he said. "Your mother thought the world of you." "She thought in neat lines," I said. "She didn't want arguments." He nodded, eyes kind. I handed him the folder. He read quickly, lips moving slightly, then closed it with a satisfied nod. "This is clean," he said. "Your mother set the order and the amounts. There are modest gifts to family, yes, but the majority is directed to the fund. The bank designations support the plan." Dean shifted in his chair. "How modest is modest?" Evan met his eyes. "Modest bequests are measured in gratitude, not yardage." "We're grieving," Karen murmured, which was true and also untrue. Evan turned to me. "You can sign intent documents now, if you wish, aligning the hospital with the trust. You're not obligated to, but it can prevent confusion later. I can witness. Caroline can countersign." My fingers pressed into the blue form in my notebook. Rain ticked against the window. My mother's breaths made their tiny hills and valleys. I felt the iron bead inside me melt and spread like ink across fabric. "Let's do it," I said. "Today." Evan's mouth softened, a hint of a smile. "Quiet courage has a sound," he said, and it sounded like the scratch of my pen as I wrote my name. We signed in a small conference room with a watercolor of tulips on the wall. Caroline brought the formal letters, confirming the hospital's acceptance of the fund and its purpose. Evan brought witness forms and his steady presence. Marta joined us to represent social work, her enamel daisy catching the dome light. I wrote my name where the blue lines waited. It felt like closing a door in a storm. The murmur of the hallway faded to a seashell hush. When we finished, Caroline reached across the table and shook my hand. "You've built a room for other families," she said. "They will not know you, but they will know the warmth." Dean had followed us because of course he had. He waited until Caroline left, then stepped into the doorway, jaw tight, voice careful. "What exactly did you sign?" "The hospital will establish the Margaret Finch Compassion Fund," I said. "The trust directs assets thereafter bequests." I signed an intent letter, so there's no dispute. His nostrils flared. "You decided that without us." "Mom decided it," I said. 9 months ago, with a lawyer." Karen leaned against the door jamb, hands clasped like a parishioner. "This is unkind, Laurel. Your mother meant to help her family." "She is helping her family," I said, calm as a folded sheet. "Just not in the way you pictured. She's paying forward the comfort that helped her breathe." Lila appeared behind them, eyes wide. "So, we get nothing?" "You get what she left you," I said. "It's accounted for. Small sums, acknowledged love. The rest is a practice with her name on it." Dean looked past me to Evan, who stood with quiet posture near the corner. "Is this even enforceable?" Evan met him with the steady gaze of a man who enjoys bicycle maintenance. "Very. Your mother's competence is well documented. The bank designations funnel to the trust, and the trust instructs the fund. Your sister's letter of intent ensures coordination. So we're cut out." "You are bequeathed," Evan said.
Modestly.
"Your mother was generous. She chose where to place her larger generosity." Dean let out a strangled, bitter sound that wanted to be a laugh. "It's outrageous." "What's outrageous," I said softly, "is fighting over a woman's savings while she sleeps a few feet away." He stared at me. The old quarrels we never voiced lined the space between us like cracked tile. He had been our father's favorite, then no one's favorite, then a person who loved money, as if it were a lifeboat. I had loved work and timetables and the neat sense of boxes checked. I had also loved my mother's quiet rooms. We had grown into our responsibilities like different plants in the same yard. Karen tried again. "Your mother told me she wanted to help me. I believed her." "Then take comfort that her name will be sung in hallways you'll never enter," I said. "Let that be your help." There was a stillness then, a clean, ringing stillness. The fluorescent light hummed, gentle and relentless. Rain tapped the window like a polite guest. I could feel my pulse in my wrists, steady, unafraid. Dean spoke last, his voice made of corners. "You always wanted control." "I wanted peace," I said. "She wanted kindness. We both get what we wanted." He looked like he might throw something, then remembered he preferred tidy outcomes. He lifted his briefcase and left. Karen followed, shaking her head, and Lila trailed, texting with both thumbs. Evan exhaled, a long, even sound. Marta touched my shoulder, a light, human gesture. "Sometimes the right thing sounds cold to the people who are warm to taking," she said. I returned to my mother's room in the soft afterglow of finish. Her breathing had changed, lighter, like the body was loosening its grip. I sat and took her hand, and I told her about the fund. "Music first," I said and smiled. "Mrs. Ortega's violin, for the person who walks in scared. The room will change. I promise." My mother's eyelids fluttered, a tiny wave in a tiny ocean. If she heard me, she took it in without noise. Outside our window, the rain ended, and a pale stripe of winter sun broke across the lot. It found the corner of her blanket and warmed it, as if pointing, as if blessing. My mother died 2 days later, just before dawn, when the sky was without opinion. The nurse on duty had a voice like warm tea. She arranged my mother's hands and turned down the sheet. She shut off the monitor with a gentle authority that felt like mercy. I kissed my mother's forehead and thought of shelves of biographies, arranged by subject, not fame. The quiet work of respect. In the week that followed, life happened in tidy columns and messy margins. The funeral was small as she wanted. A neighbor brought a lemon pound cake that tasted like sunlight. People told me stories about my mother's real gifts. How she kept a spare pair of reading glasses in her purse for strangers. How she wrote long, careful notes in sympathy cards, never using the words at a loss. How she stopped once on a summer street to retie an old man's sneaker because he was too proud to bend. Dean skipped the reception and called later about paperwork, then stopped calling altogether. Karen sent a single text with a flower emoji, then posted a memory on a social site that made her look generous. Lila sent a direct message asking if the fund would have a logo, because branding mattered. I replied with the link to the hospital page, brief and clean, and left it there. Evan met me at the house to go over the final steps. We sat at my mother's kitchen table, the one with the little burn mark near the sugar bowl from the time she set down a hot pan without a pad. "I admired your mother's clarity," he said, flipping through tabs. "I admire yours too." "Clarity hurts sometimes," I said, "but it keeps shape." He smiled. "Good law does that. Good love, too." The day the hospital announced the fund, I visited alone. Marta walked me to a small lounge where a violinist played on the first Friday of each month. A cart with paperbacks waited near the door. There was a bulletin board with thank you notes like small white birds. A mother of 3 who had slept in a chair for 2 nights wrote that she had been given meal vouchers and a blanket that didn't scratch. A man who had lost his father thanked the program for helping with an extra day. No one mentioned my name. They wrote to the idea of comfort and to the woman whose name they now knew. I listened to the violinist, a student from the community college, play something liquid and forgiving. It washed over the tile and the plastic chairs and the tired faces and the volunteers' calm hands. The room changed. I felt it like the earth tilting toward light. After the announcement, I returned home and opened my mother's windows. Cold air moved through the rooms, carrying the scent of late winter and bus exhaust and something floral from a neighbor's brave tree. I made tea, then carried the box of family photographs to the living room rug. I sorted them by decade and by occasion and by the size of my mother's joy. In one, she stood in her apron, flower on her cheek, a woman who could wrap a gift with brown paper and string and make it look like a treasure. In another, she curled on the couch with a library book, socks mismatched, eyes alight. I chose a frame and placed it on the mantel, next to a small glass jar that once held time. I filled the jar with water and clipped a sprig of ivy from the stair railing. The leaves tilted toward the window, emerald and stubborn. I started a list of repairs on a yellow pad. The house would be sold, as the trust instructed, but it would leave this world tidy. I patched the paint near the doorbell, tightened a loose cabinet hinge, replaced a bulb over the sink. Work with a beginning and an end calmed me. Spring came late, and then all at once. Tulips stepped out in neighbors' yards, casual and proud. I bought packets of seeds for the community garden at the hospital, a project that would be part of the fund's second year. I showed up on a Saturday in old jeans and sunblock and knelt in the dirt with a man who had lost a sister and a teenager who had just earned her GED and a nurse who laughed at herself when she dropped the trowel. We planted rows of herbs and a winding line of marigolds to keep the ants out. The work was gentle and exacting. We tied twine between stakes. We didn't tell our full stories. We didn't need to. On the day the first grant from the fund was awarded, Marta sent me a short message. A father slept without fear. It read, because the fee was covered. I read it twice, then 3 times, then I folded the phone into my pocket and stepped outside to the small balcony. The city was soft with evening, windows coming on like a gradual choir. Sometimes I think about the moment in the conference room when the pen moved across paper and how quiet it was, and how loud the meaning felt inside my chest. Sometimes I think about my brother's face and how disappointment can make a person look like a stranger. Mostly I think about my mother's request, scratched onto plain paper with blue ink, asking me to choose music first. I did. It keeps choosing us back. This is the story of a ledger rewritten as a lullaby. It is also the story of a woman whose kindness learned how to travel when she could no longer walk. Morning light now finds her name printed on a small plaque by a cart filled with books, and on an email inbox with a budget spreadsheet, and on the lips of a violinist who pauses to tune the E string and then begins again. I water the ivy in the jar by her photograph. I wash the blue plates from her wedding and dry them with a thin linen towel until they shine. I go to the garden and brush soil from my knees. The world asks for more and more, but kindness knows how to multiply without fear. My mother taught me that signing the papers was not punishment. It was our family's true language, set down where it could be read. If this story touched you, share your thoughts below and subscribe for more stories of quiet revenge.